Okay, so again, I'm going to be recording this explanation so you guys could have it on Google Classroom later. So please pay attention. Right here, whenever they're asking you if they're perpendicular or parallel, um, the way to determine that is by looking at the slopes. Obviously, on the board, it says parallel lines have the same slope, perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. However, when you look at the form, you cannot see an M when it's in standard form. You could see an M when it's in point slope or when it's in slope intercept, but you can't see an M when it's in standard form. So in order for you to compare the M's, it has to be either in point slope form or slope intercept form, right? But if it's in this form, you're going to have to get y by itself by subtracting ax, and then dividing by b. And then once you have y by itself, once y is by itself, you'll be able to look at the mx term, and then you'll be able to see the m. I hope that makes sense. Let's take a look at this. As you could see right here, this is in slope intercept form. The slope is 1. And over here, you cannot see the slope because it's in standard form. So you got to get the x term to the other side by adding 2x, you're going to rewrite it. 2y equals, you can't really subtract negative 15x with a plus 2x, so you're just going to rewrite it. 2x minus 15. And finally, you're going to divide by 2, divide by 2. So you'll get y equals 1x minus, who cares about the b value, because you're not even graphing it. All you're doing is comparing this m, which is 1, with this m, which is 1, which they are the same, which means that these are parallel. So again, I'm recording this. Please pay attention. On this question, it says, write the equation of this line in all three forms. Okay, so when you look at a line, right here, they give you a point, like they specifically give you this point, x1, y1. Of course, there's lots of points, right? But they specifically give you the 1, 2 as a point. And they also give you a slope right here. The m value is 3. So if they give you a point, which is 1, 2, x1, y1, and they give you a slope, which is 3, it's really easy to write it in point slope form. Point slope form, sorry about that. Point slope form is y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1. So you should be able to copy this down from the board. And when you use point slope form, rewrite it with blank spots. Y minus blank spot equals blank spot parentheses x minus blank spot, right? So your y1 value is 2, your m value is 3, your x1 value is 1, and that is an equation in point slope form. Okay, so if your test gives you this graph and they say write it in point slope form, this would be your answer. This is what you type in. What if the test, it says, here's your line, write it in slope intercept? Well, slope intercept is y equals mx plus b. So you could distribute the 3 and then move the 2 to the other side by adding 2, getting y by itself to get y equals mx plus b. Or you could look back at the graph and say this right here, that b value is -1. So if you know your m and you know your b, then you're able to write it in y equals mx plus b. Y equals mx plus b. So that's really a y equals 3x minus 1. So that's your y equals mx plus b equation. This is the slope intercept. Okay. Now, if you were to have distributed 3 times x, 3 times -1, and then add 2 to both sides, you'd get this answer anyway. So it's totally up to you how you want to do it. And last but not least, if you want to change it to standard form is ax plus by equals c. In other words, you want your x's and your y's on the left side of the equal sign. So here's the equal sign. Let's get that x to the left side. All you have to do is subtract the 3x, subtract the 3x. So you'd have a -3x with a plus y equaling the -1. This is standard form. Standard. Okay. So those are all three forms right there. We have our point slope form. We have our slope intercept form. And we have our standard form. Be very careful with the instructions on the test. They're only going to ask for one, not all three. Let's move on to the next question. This one says a line has a slope 2 and the y-intercept -3. Write the equation in slope-intercept form. This one is like a free point on the test. Go for it. So in math, whenever you have a question like this, you got to ask yourself, what are they giving you? What are they giving you? So they're giving you obviously a slope that's 2, and they're giving you a y-intercept of -3. So again, they're giving you the m value, and the y-intercept is technically the b value, or it's also a coordinate, right? So you could say that they give you a point and a slope, but since they're asking for slope-intercept, do they give you a slope? Yes. Do they give you a y-intercept? Yes. So you just write it out. Y equals mx plus b. Y equals, the m is 2, x plus b, the b value is -3. So you didn't have to put a plus negative. As a matter of fact, it's probably better if you just write it as a -3. So there's your answer, y equals 2x minus 3. If you did put plus negative, it's still correct. Okay. Any questions? Simple, right? If you take a look at this one, you might think that it's the same exact question, but it's really not, right? Right here, it's saying a line has the slope of 1/2 and has the x-intercept of -6. Okay. So what are they giving you here? The slope. And what is an x-intercept? Is that the b value? No. Yeah, so they're technically, like you said, they're technically giving you a point and they're giving you a slope. So you could use point slope form, but the thing is, what is that point? You got to think of the x-intercept location on the xy plane. So if you actually went to the location on the xy plane, here's your x-axis. Where does it cross the x? -6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What is this location right there? -6 comma 0. Perfect. So that is the point that they're giving you, -6 comma 0. You got to be able to conclude that on your own on the test, right? Right here, I'm telling you, I'm setting it up for you. So I'm really giving you a point and a slope. Go for it. Write it in point slope form, and then you're going to have to change it to slope intercept. So since I give you a point and a slope, we're going to go with point slope form. Let me just rewrite that right here. There it is, point slope form. So we're going to plug in our point and our slope in a point slope form. Whenever I do that, I recommend rewriting it with blank spots. That way you could easily plug in your x1, y1. So your y1 is 0 and your x1 is -6. So the negative changes to plus plus, and the m value is 1/2. So you really have y minus 0, and y minus 0 is technically just y, equals, you're going to take this 1/2 and distribute it. 1/2 times x is 1/2 x. 1/2 times 6, you could do it on a calculator, it'll give you 3. So this is your equation in slope-intercept form. Again, the only reason why we distributed was because they asked for it in slope-intercept form, okay? If they would have said point slope form, I would have left it like this, but since it says slope intercept, we had to distribute and get y by itself. Let's move on to the next question. Right here, this one says a line passes through 0, -4 and is perpendicular to this equation. So whenever you see the word perpendicular or parallel, you should be thinking, like, if you look at the wall, if you ever see the word parallel or perpendicular, they're technically giving you the slope. Parallel lines have the same exact slope. Perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. So what does that mean? It means change the sign and flip the fraction. So I'm telling you that our slope is going to be perpendicular to this slope. What does that mean that our slope is perpendicular to this slope? You're going to have to change the sign of this slope and flip the fraction. So whenever you see perpendicular, I'm giving you the slope, but indirectly I'm giving you the slope. So what does m equal? -2/1, which is just 2, right? So that's the first thing you need to get, your slope. And what else do I give you? I give you a point. And what is the point? X1, Y1, it's 0, -4. So since I give you a point and a slope, you could write it in point slope form. And whenever you use point slope form, I recommend rewriting it with blank spots. Y minus y1 equals m parenthesis x minus x1. And then you could plug in your x1, y1. Your x1 happens to be 0. Your y1 happens to be -4. And of course, your M value was a perpendicular slope, which is -2. So they want this in standard form. So you could distribute or not distribute x minus 0. That's technically just x, right? And of course, you still have to multiply it by -2. So -2 times x, that's simply -2x. And then over here, you have a plus plus 4. So you really have a y plus 4, but you don't want that plus 4. So you subtract 4, and there it is in slope intercept form. Y equals -2x minus 4. Now, let me pause right here. They're not asking for slope intercept, they're asking for standard. But you could have technically avoided all of this work if you would have taken a moment and realized what this point actually is. This point right here, yes, it's a point, 0, -4. But where is that on the actual XY plane? That's actually on the Y axis. So this is technically your Y intercept value. So this is technically your B value. So right from the beginning, you could have said, wait a minute, this is not no regular point. That's actually the B value of -4. And then you could have just said, all right, then Y equals -2x plus 4 or plus -4, right? Or just -4. You see, end up with the same exact slope intercept form equation. So you could have avoided all this work by recognizing that that's a B value and understanding that your slope is a perpendicular slope to this guy. And now to get it in standard form, because that's what they're asking for, standard form, if you look at it, is ax plus by equals c. You want your x and y's on the left side of the equal sign. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to move the x's and y's to the left. So we're going to, the y's already on the left side. We're just going to move that -2x by adding 2x. So here's your standard form equation, positive 2x plus y equals -4. So there's the answer that you're supposed to type in. All right, guys, right here, I give you a line and I want you to write an equation. It doesn't matter which equation. It could be any equation you want. Let's keep it simple. Let's go with slope intercept form. So let's do slope intercept form. Okay, so all you need is technically your slope and then your B value, your Y intercept, and then you could write it in Y equals mx plus B. So all you need is the slope and the Y intercept. So what is the slope? You just gotta look at the line from left to right, just the way you read a sentence, from left to right. So obviously from left to right, this thing's going up, so my slope is positive. But how much do you go up from one point to another? You can see these two red dots. You go up 2/1. So the slope is 2/1, or you could just say 2. Okay. What about the B value? Oh, it crosses right there at the Y value of 4, right? So the B value is 4. So B equals 4. So if you know your M is 2, you have 2x, and you know that your B is 4, you have plus B, which is plus 4. There you go. That's your slope intercept form equation. So what is the equation of this line? Let's first talk about all the things that you need to know about vertical lines, okay? Vertical lines are always going to be x equals a number. Okay, so in this case, the equation is x equals 3. Now, if you're thinking, why the heck is it 3? Why is it x equals if it's going up and down? It's this simple. Any point on this blue line, this dot, that dot, that dot, that's the location 3, 3. This is location 3, 2. This is the location 3, 1. This is the location 3, 0. This is the location 3, -1. So you could go through every single point on this, and what do you know? Every single x value is 3. Every single x value is 3. The x values of this vertical line has to be 3. That's why this equation is read x equals 3, because the x values have to be 3. It doesn't have a y because y could be whatever you want. It could be 350 way up here. It could be 3 -10 way down here, right? It could be 3 anything. It could be 3 and then 4.5. It could be right there, and it's still going to be on the line. So the only thing that matters here about this vertical line is that your x values are 3. That's why the equation of this vertical line is x equals 3. Any equation that's or any line that's vertical is going to have the equation x equals whatever that is. So if for some reason I put a dot right here and I did a vertical line right there, that would be the equation x equals -4. Does that make sense? Okay. In addition to that, you need to know certain key facts about these vertical lines. Like if you have x equals a number, it's going to be vertical. That means that it'll never cross the y-axis because it's parallel to it. It'll never cross the y-axis. Okay. Likewise, horizontal lines go from left to right and they cross the y-axis at a certain value. So we'll get to that in a bit. But right now, I hope we understand that vertical lines are x equals a certain value. And we're going to move on. But you need to know that fact. So normally, when you see a question that says, write the equation of the line that passes through the following 2 points, you're supposed to automatically think, well, this is a x1, y1, x2, y2, and you could do the slope formula. So let's say we're so used to doing that, we jump right in. Let's write down the slope formula. But instead of the y2, I leave blank spots so I could identify the x1, y1 and the x2, y2. So when I plug it in, I'll have the 1 right here. Y2 is 1, y1 is -3, x2 is 3, x1 is 3. So the minus minus change the plus plus. Up on top, we have a 4, and on the bottom, we have a 0. Now, what is 4 divided by 0? That means undefined. If you try to do 4 divided by 0 on a calculator, it's going to say error. Okay, guys, focus. So let's actually think about what an undefined slope actually means. It's so steep that it's vertical, right? I mean, think about it. Slope is really rise over run. So from whatever point you're at, you're going to rise 4 and you're going to run 0. So it's directly up 4 units. That's a vertical line. So if you were to think about the actual location of 3, -3 and 3, +1, you'll see that it was actually the graph that we just did. So if we go to 3, -3, that's down here, 3, +1, it's up here. What kind of line is that? It's a vertical line. And we just said that vertical lines are x equals a certain number. In this case, x equals what? X equals 3. So that's the equation of this line, okay? So the equation of this line is x equals 3. And that's what I'm asking for. What is the equation? It's x equals 3. So what's the equation of this one? This one's not vertical. This one's horizontal. It's pretty simple. If x equals a number is vertical, y equals a number will be horizontal, okay? This equation right here is y equals 2, okay? Y equals 2, that's the equation. Why? Because any coordinate on this line, that coordinate, this coordinate, this coordinate right here, any coordinate is going to have the y value of 2. This coordinate's -3, 2. This coordinate is -1, 2. This coordinate right here is 0, 2. This coordinate over here is 2, 2. If you notice, all of those y values, the y value is 2, 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 all of them have the y value of 2. So that's why this horizontal line is y equals 2. You guys understand that, correct? Okay. Will this y equals 2 line ever cross the x-axis? No, because it's parallel to it. It'll never cross the x-axis. Okay, if I asked you what is the slope of this line, what would you say the slope is? Is it undefined? No, it's 0. That's right. It's totally flat. Slope is steepness. This has the slope 0 because it's not steep at all. It's like the floor. It's the opposite of steep. There is no steepness. That's 0 steepness. Now, if it were vertical, that's so steep that it's undefined. Okay, this is a related question. Write the equation of the line that passes through these 2 points. Okay, so like always on our notes, if I give you 2 points, you're going to go with slope formula. So like always, we're going to begin with the 2 points, labeling them x1, y1, x2, y2. And at the top of our notes on the board, it says the slope formula. So let's find out the slope at least of this line that they want us to write. And once you find your slope and you have a point, maybe you could jump into point slope form, and then you could change it to slope intercept. Then you could change it to standard depending on what you want to do. Anyway, when we plug in the y2 value of 2 and the y1 value of 2 and the x2 value of 4 and the x1 value of -2, you change the minus minus to plus plus, you end up with m equaling 0 over 6. That's really just 0. On a calculator, 0 divided by 6 is just 0. Now, that's not the answer. This is just the slope. The slope is 0. What the heck does that mean? How steep is this line? It's totally flat like the floor. That means that it's horizontal, okay? So if you think about the location of this point, negative 2, 2, and this point, 4, 2, you're technically going to have the graph that we just looked at. Negative 2, 2 is right here, and positive 4, 2 is right there. What kind of line is that? It's a horizontal line crossing the y-axis at 2. Therefore, the equation is y equals 2. So right here, it says write the equation of the line that passes through these 2 points. And the reason why I put the notes up on the board in this order is because whenever you have 2 points, the only thing you could do is apply the slope formula, and that'll give you the slope. And once you have the slope, you could use that first point to have your point and your slope, and you could do it now in point slope form. And then from there, you could switch it to slope intercept by distributing the m and getting rid of the y1 to get y by itself. Then you'll have y by itself, it'll be in slope intercept. And then from there, it's easy to get it back to standard or get it to standard form by subtracting the mx and moving it to the left side, subtracting mx. So that'd be your x term, your y term, and your c value, your number all by itself on the right side. Maybe that doesn't make too much sense right now that I'm explaining it just by looking at the board, but let's begin by using the slope formula. The slope formula is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And when we use that formula, I recommend rewriting it, but with blank spots. So you have your division and your subtractions, and then you label x1, y1, x2, y2. So your y2 is 4, your y1 is 2, your x2 is 6, your x1 is 4. So what do we have on top? A 2. What do we have on the bottom? A 2, which means that our slope is really 1. Is everybody with me? Okay, so we have the slope of 1, and we have some points. So because we have some points, this is a point x1, y1, let's use that one. And because we have a slope, point slope, we can now go with point slope form. So point slope form is y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1. And I always, whenever I use point slope form, I rewrite it with blank spots. Y minus blank spot equals blank spot parentheses x minus blank spot. So you could see that right here, the y1 goes right there. So y1 happens to be 2 in this case. So you put the 2 right there. The x1 value goes right here inside the parentheses, and x1 is 4, so the 4 goes right there. And of course, the m we found out was 1, and that's like the easiest type of m because when you multiply by 1, it doesn't change anything. So anyways, let's say this equation or this problem on the test said, write the equation in point slope form that passes through these 2 points. This would be your point slope form equation, and you would be done. This would be it. This is your point slope form. Point slope. Now, what if it didn't say write it in point slope form? What if it said write it in slope intercept? Not this one, but this next one down. So of course, you're going to have to get rid of the parentheses by distributing. Then you have to get rid of this number by doing the opposite. And what you do to one side, you do the other. Then you get y by itself. So let's change this to slope intercept. In other words, I want to write it in all 3 forms. So if I distribute the 1, nothing changes. I'll still have a x minus 4, right? 1 times x is still x, 1 times minus 4 is still minus 4. Then you bring down the y minus 2. You almost have y by itself. All you have to do is do the opposite of minus 2, which is plus 2. Plus 2 cancels out. Here's your slope intercept form equation. Y equals x minus 2, where your m is technically a 1 and your b value is this minus 2 right there. So this is slope intercept form. You don't have to put the 1. That's your slope intercept form. Okay, so if it said write the equation in slope intercept form of the line that passes through these 2 points, yeah, you would start with point slope, but then you would have to switch to slope intercept. Now, what if the equation or the problem said write it in standard form? That's the last one down. All you have to do is move the x term to the left side. So you could have the x's and the y's on the left side of the equal sign. So you just got to get rid of this x term. So we just have to get rid of this x term. How do we get rid of that 1x? You simply subtract 1x. And what you do to one side, do to the other side, subtract 1x. And now you could rewrite it in standard form. This is negative x plus y equaling negative 2. This is standard form, but a better standard form, or maybe on a multiple choice test, you don't see this exact standard form. They may have multiplied everything by negative 1, changing all the signs for a positive x, a minus y, and a positive 2. That technically looks a little nicer. That's standard form. And that's all three forms. Once again, here's the point slope. Here's the slope intercept, y equals mx plus b. And here's the standard form, ax plus by equals c. All three forms. Check this one out. It says a line has the y-intercept of 3 and passes through the point -7, 17. Write the equation in all three forms. Well, we have all three forms on the board: point slope form, slope intercept form, and standard form. But how do we begin this thing? Well, let's begin by seeing what they give us and how we could use it. So what do they give us? They give us a y-intercept, the y-intercept of 3. That's technically the b value in y equals mx plus b. But the thing is, we don't know the m, okay? So we're not going to start by doing a y equals mx plus b. We have a b, but we don't know the m, so there's not enough. If you wanted to use y equals mx plus b, you could technically plug in the x, plug in the y, plug in the b, and solve for m. But you could also think of it this way. The y-intercept of 3 is technically a location. 1, 2, 3. It's right there. That's where it crosses the y-axis. What is that location? It's 0, 3. So technically, even though that's the b value, even though it's the y-intercept, I'm technically giving you a point. And that point is 0, 3. So that's technically like a x1, y1. And the point -7, 17, well, actually, working it backwards, let's not label it x1, y1. Let's go to -7, 17, just to give you a rough idea of where that's at. -7, 17 is way up here. So it's going to be a line that's going down like that with the negative slope. But the reality is you have 2 points, 1 point and another point. And what could we do with 2 points? You could use a slope formula. Does that make sense? So let's begin by labeling this first point x1, y1, and this one x2, y2, okay? Why did I choose to go with x1, y1 and x2, y2? Because -7, 17 is way up here somewhere. And from left to right, that would be your first point. This would be your second point, right? So it doesn't really matter which one you actually label first or second. As long as you don't make any mathematical errors, you should get the same answer. But anyways, we're going to start with the slope formula. Y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That's 3 minus 17 over 0 minus -7. So the minus negative changes to plus plus. We end up with a -14 over 7, which means that our slope is actually -2. Are you with me? Okay, it's probably one of the hardest questions on the test. So you have your slope, you have a point. Let's start with point slope form. So we're going to begin with point slope form. So that's y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1, where your m value is -2. We just found it. Your y1 value is 17. Your x1 value is -7. Change the minus minus to plus plus. So there's your point slope form equation. Y minus 17 equals -2 parentheses x plus 7. If it asks for it in point slope form, you would stop right there because this is point slope form, okay? Now, if they ask you to change it to slope intercept, then you don't want the parentheses, so you'd have to distribute the -2. And when you distribute that -2, you're going to have a -2x with the -14. So if you go -2 times x, it's -2x, -2 times 7 is -14. The equal signs here bring down the y minus 17. And to get y by itself, all you do is get rid of that -17 by adding 17 and adding 17. So now you have y by itself equals -2x plus 3. So that's your slope intercept form equation. Then from there, if you want it in standard form is the last one where you have x's and y's on the left side of the equal sign. All you got to do is get that x to the left side of the equal sign because the y's already over there. So you're simply going to add 2x, and there's your standard form equation, 2x plus y equals +3. So you have your point slope, you have your slope intercept, and you have your standard. All three forms. I hope we're able to do that on our own on the test Thursday.